Deep Woods Horror Stories. The first story, Anonymous.
I'm sorry if I mess up any details here, but what I'm about to tell you is something my best friend shared with me years ago, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's one of those stories that leaves a mark on you, no matter how many times you hear it. My buddy's dad worked as a logger, but not in the typical sense. He operated this giant, heavy-duty machine called a tree saw, which is exactly what it sounds like. A massive contraption that cuts down trees and slices them into specific lengths. It was tough work, long hours, often alone out in the wild woods of the Appalachian Mountains. And here's the kicker. He got paid based on how many trees he cut down, not the hours he worked. So a lot of times he'd push himself to work 16 to 20 hours a day to wrap up jobs quickly. After him and his buddy Griffin were done cutting, the rest of the crew would come in to clear out the logs and get them to the mill. So while my friend's dad spent a lot of time working alone, half of it was with Griffin. The two of them worked pretty closely together, keeping in touch via radios, especially since they were often on opposite sides of the job site. A few years back, they were sent to a job up on a remote mountain. The company had to spend 3 weeks just clearing a path wide enough for their trucks and equipment to get through. By the time they were ready to start working, they were way out in the middle of nowhere. It was one of those places where you're so far out that it feels like no one's ever been there before. They'd been working for about 10 days, making decent progress, when they started hearing weird things over the radio. At first, it was just muffled voices, faint static that didn't make any sense. They tried changing the channels, but no matter what they did, the chatter kept following them. If you've ever used a regular radio, you know how strange that is. It shouldn't be possible for someone to follow you through multiple channels. As they got deeper into the mountain, the voices started getting clearer. It wasn't full conversations, but enough to make out some words. The tone of it was off, casual at times, but the words didn't quite fit. My friend's dad said it felt like eavesdropping on a conversation you weren't supposed to hear. They also started finding some weird signs that people had been there before them. Random containers, some footprints in the dirt, and even a few makeshift campsites. They were working in a place so remote it didn't make any sense for anyone to be up there. One day, Griffin came across a tent off the trail and called my friend's dad over to check it out. Inside the tent, they found a single sleeping bag and a duffel bag that was filled with disturbing stuff. There were multiple pairs of children's underwear, some duct tape, rope, and some crude sketches of kids. There were also photos, one of a fresh apple, which meant whoever had been there recently. Griffin wanted to leave immediately, but my friend's dad, being the workaholic he was, insisted they finish the job. So they made a pact to only use the radio for emergencies and kept going. That night they sat in their camper, the tension between them thick. The radio crackled to life again, and this time they could hear a couple of men talking. They were talking about collecting water and firewood. Nothing special, but the fact that they were probably the same men connected to the tent freaked my friend's dad out. Griffin wasn't as worried, but my friend's dad couldn't shake it. The next night, things got worse. When he heard the men talking about gathering brush for a fire, he snapped. He grabbed the radio and demanded to know who they were and what they were doing. The moment he spoke, everything went silent. The radio went dead. No response. That silence was way creepier than any of the chatter. Griffin was pissed that my friend's dad had exposed their presence, and they ended up having a brief argument. They decided to take it up a notch the next day, figuring they needed to confront whatever was going on. Around midnight, Griffin woke my friend's dad, whispering that someone was outside the camper. The first thing my friend's dad noticed was the soft sound of footsteps crunching on the gravel. His heart raced. He fumbled around for his gun, only to realize it wasn't loaded. He had no idea where the ammo was. Griffin wasn't armed either. Calling the police was out of the question since they were so far from anywhere. They sat there frozen, listening as the camper door handle rattled. The door creaked open, but didn't fully swing inward. Their camper was high off the ground, and there was no ladder or stool to climb up. Then they heard it, the scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes along the door. 4 minutes of agony passed in silence. Finally, my friend's dad nodded at Griffin, signaling he was going to check it out. He moved silently toward the door, flashlight in hand. But before he could even reach it, the door suddenly burst open, and he was struck across the face with a knife. The pain hit like a sledgehammer. He fell hard onto the ground. Before he could get his bearings, another man appeared and started kicking him in the head. Griffin wasted no time. He leapt out of the camper and tackled the guy with the knife. The second man bolted into the darkness, and the one Griffin had tackled scrambled to his feet and followed. The two men disappeared into the woods. Griffin helped my friend's dad back into the truck, and they made the 2-hour drive to the nearest hospital. It was bad. My friend's dad had a bloody face and a nasty cut across his eye that messed up his vision for life. They reported the attack to the police, but nothing came of it. 2 weeks later, as the rest of the logging crew wrapped up the job, one of their co-workers was found in a ditch. He was bound, gagged, raped, and murdered. No arrests were ever made. To this day, my friend's dad struggles with PTSD. His right eye, now with a permanently deformed pupil, is a constant reminder of that night. I'm sure he hasn't had a peaceful night's sleep since. As for me, I've been terrified of the deep woods for years now, mostly because of what happened to my friend's dad. It's been a while since I heard from either him or his dad, but I can only hope they're doing okay.
The second story, Liam Parker.
Let me tell you about a terror I can't shake off. I'm not even sure if this is the right place to talk about it, but I've told pretty much everyone I know, family, friends, neighbors, even news outlets, and it's never enough. It's like I feel this weird, nagging obligation to tell as many people as I can about what happened, so here it goes. This happened in November of 2019, but it all started years earlier. The story goes way back, at least 7 years ago. I'd say it was around 2012 or maybe 2013, but I can't say for sure. I was in my mid-20s with a steady job and a girlfriend, now my fiancé. I'd never went to college, so I'd been in the workforce for a while. I was living a simple, steady life, no big changes on the horizon. There was no real reason to leave my hometown, so I didn't. At that point, my girlfriend and I had just moved into my childhood home, a place my parents had passed on to me when they got older. My dad had inherited it from his parents when he was about 40, and now it was mine. It was a solid, sturdy house, though it had been renovated a few times over the years. Still, you could tell it had seen a lot of history. It had the kind of charm that only comes with age. The brick walls stood out in our neighborhood, as there weren't many brick houses around. Our house sat at the very end of the street, bordered by a massive stretch of woods on 2 sides. The forest behind us seemed endless, and as a kid I used to go exploring in there with my brothers. No matter how many times we wandered through, we never got anywhere close to exploring at all. The woods felt like its own world, and for a lot of people that would have been intimidating. For me though, it felt like home. I was the kind of guy who didn't mind being alone, so the isolation wasn't an issue. Anyway, my girlfriend and I had been living there for a few months when the weirdness started. It was winter. I don't remember the exact month, but it was after the first snow had fallen. One Sunday morning after 8 a.m., the only day of the week I could sleep in, I was heading out to my truck to grab my usual coffee. That's when I noticed something strange. There, in the driveway, next to my car, was a trail of footprints in the snow. I thought it might have been my girlfriend, maybe she had gotten up early, but as I looked around, I quickly realized that couldn't be the case. The trail led from our yard to a hole in the side fence, which meant the footprints had come from the woods. And the strangest part, they didn't go near the house. They went straight to the driver's side of my truck, then turned around and walked back into the woods. I stood there for a minute, completely confused. Who would be walking out there in the snow in the middle of nowhere at this hour? And why would they walk up to my truck, then just turn back? It didn't make sense. When I asked my girlfriend about it later, she obviously didn't know anything about it. That day, it was easy to brush off, but it stuck in my mind. A couple of winters later, in 2015, things got a whole lot weirder. I remember the year clearly because it was the same year my Seahawks lost that heartbreaking Super Bowl to Tom Brady. I was walking to my car one morning, maybe it was a weekday, but I can't say for sure. But when I stepped outside, something felt off. I looked around, and the yard was covered in footprints. Not just a few, but all over. They were in the driveway, by the windows, along the entire perimeter of the house. It was like someone or something had been walking around our property for hours. I'm usually a pretty level-headed guy, so I didn't panic, but I wasn't exactly calm either. The yard was completely covered in prints. I quickly ran around the house to check for anything suspicious, but I didn't see anyone. The place felt deserted, though I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching. I didn't have much time since I was late for work, but I sent my girlfriend a quick text to let her know, just in case she noticed anything strange when she woke up. I didn't want her to freak out. That day at work was a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the footprints, so I ended up leaving early. When I got home, my girlfriend was waiting for me with something that made my blood run cold. She pointed to one of the trails and told me she'd been obsessing over it all day. At first, I didn't get what she was talking about, but when I looked more closely, I saw it. There were no shoe marks. The prints were completely barefoot. My heart sank. Who the hell would be walking around outside in the freezing cold with no shoes? I couldn't think of a single reasonable explanation. My girlfriend suggested it could have been an animal, but these prints were clearly human. Bare feet, perfectly formed prints. We called my dad for advice, and while he was just as baffled as we were, he told me to grab my rifle and track down whoever or whatever left the prints. I wasn't keen on the idea, but I knew it was on me to figure it out. My girlfriend was scared and wanted to call the police, but I told her there wasn't enough evidence for them to do anything. No crime had been committed, at least not yet. So, with rifle in hand, I headed out into the woods. I followed the trail for what felt like forever. After about 30 minutes, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. The trail split in two. I couldn't tell which way to go. At first, I thought maybe the person had doubled back to mess with me, but then a chilling thought crossed my mind. What if there were two people? The possibility hadn't even crossed my mind until then, but suddenly it seemed all too real. I stood there, torn, for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do. The idea of being outnumbered, of not knowing who or what I was following, unsettled me. But as the sun began to dip, I decided to turn back. I didn't want to be out there in the dark. The whole thing felt off, and every step I took back toward the house made me feel more exposed. As I walked back, I couldn't shake the thought of those two paths. I kept wondering, if it was just one person, would they have walked backwards to make it seem like there were two? Maybe someone had been carrying another person, but I couldn't be sure. I went back home and told my girlfriend everything. We ended up calling the police, but they just shrugged it off. Without solid evidence of a crime, they said there wasn't much they could do. If police can't help, I'll do it by myself then. I told my girlfriend I'd head back into the woods, but the next morning I woke up to find that the snow-covered ground outside was littered with footprints, hundreds of them, scattered all over my property. My girlfriend, who had been asleep beside me, couldn't even get up out of bed when she saw what I was looking at. She broke down, asking me, "Are we ever going to get away from this?" I didn't have an answer. The fear was overwhelming, worse than last time. It was bad. The prints weren't just all over the yard, they led to my shed. And to my horror, tools were missing. All sorts of equipment that had been left out was gone. Who could have done this? Who were these people? I couldn't shake the anger that started bubbling up in my chest. It was maddening. The idea that someone had come back to terrorize us once again was more than I could bear. I didn't want my fiancée to panic more than she already was, but I couldn't ignore what was happening. So I called up my old buddy David. He's a wilderness expert, the kind of guy who knows how to survive out there in the woods with nothing but his wits and gear. He's also one of the best hunters I know, which is why I asked him for help. He didn't hesitate. A few hours later, he showed up at my place, ready to figure out what was going on. My girlfriend was a wreck, but I reassured her that David and I would be fine. We had a plan. We geared up for the cold, knowing we could be out there for hours. What really helped calm my nerves was David's thermal scope for his AR-10. It was expensive as hell, but it gave us a major advantage, especially since I didn't have any gear that would help me see in the dark. It didn't eliminate my fear, but at least one of us would have a fighting chance to spot whatever we were tracking. The sun was low in the sky as we started our search, walking in silence for the first 45 minutes. But as the day dragged on, the seriousness of the situation really started to sink in. We weren't just out for a hike anymore. This was something else. I kept telling myself that I wasn't dragging David into anything he couldn't handle, but I was starting to wonder if that was true. I was scared, and I wasn't sure what we were getting ourselves into. Finally, we came across something strange. The trail of footprints split into two different sets. We followed the left one, but after a while it just stopped, dead in its tracks. It didn't make sense. We retraced our steps and tried again, but after a few more attempts, David pointed out that whoever was out here was deliberately trying to throw us off. The tracks didn't make sense. They didn't behave like any normal set of prints I'd ever seen. At one point, we came across an intersection of tracks that seemed to fade in and out, like whoever had walked there knew exactly how to cover their tracks. David and I continued on, growing more uneasy with each passing minute. The deeper we got into the woods, the less I recognized anything. This was territory I knew like the back of my hand, but nothing looked familiar anymore. The footprints became deeper, more pronounced, as if we were getting closer. I started to feel an overwhelming sense of dread creeping up my spine. Then, just as I was starting to think we were going to find something, another set of footprints appeared beside the original trail. Night began to fall, and it became harder to see, but David, with his scope, was still able to pick out details that I couldn't see. We kept moving, following the tracks, knowing we had to find out what was going on. At this point, my heart was pounding. There was no turning back. And then, without warning, Theo raised his hand to stop me. He was dead still, peering through the scope. I couldn't see what he was looking at, but I could feel his tension. He didn't even breathe. I watched him closely, waiting for him to move. After what felt like an eternity, he crouched behind a tree, motioning me to do the same. We waited for what felt like an hour, not daring to make a sound. David was shaking. The anticipation was killing me. Eventually, he handed me the rifle without a word. My hands trembled as I looked through the scope. What I saw still haunts me to this day. 4 figures huddled together in the snow. At first I thought they were bears, but they weren't. They were human. 2 of them were big, hulking figures, and the other 2 were smaller, crouched low to the ground, moving erratically. They were eating something. I couldn't make out much more than the heat signatures in the scope, but it was clear they were naked. Naked and wild, like something out of a nightmare. My stomach churned as I watched them. They didn't seem to notice us, and after a few moments, the larger ones lifted the smaller ones onto their shoulders and began moving deeper into the woods. We stayed under that tree for a long time, not moving, not making a sound. I don't know how we managed it, but we made sure to wait until we were certain they couldn't hear us before we moved again. We finally made it back to my house after what felt like an eternity. To my surprise, my girlfriend was still awake. She was terrified, pacing back and forth. I tried to tell her what happened in as few words as possible, but she could see in my face that it was worse than I was letting on. We called the police, but when they came, they didn't take the situation seriously. They promised to check the woods first thing in the morning, but by then I knew they wouldn't find anything. They'd already missed most of the tracks, again. David and I stayed up keeping watch, but nothing happened. The next morning, the police went into the woods with us, but after a few hours, they called off the search. They said there was no evidence, no leads to follow. My girlfriend wanted them to keep looking, but they refused. The whole situation felt like it would never be resolved. We were left in a state of suspended fear, knowing something was out there, but having no idea what it was. David and I are still on edge. Winter's approaching and I know we're not safe. We're seriously considering moving, but haven't managed to get everything together yet. It's hard to shake the feeling that something is coming for us. I can't explain why this is happening to us. I've told people before, but no one seems to understand. No one else in the area has experienced anything like it. Some of my friends think I'm overreacting, but I know what I saw, and I can't forget it.
The third story, Lucas Foster.
Last summer, I attempted to hike the Appalachian Trail. I'd always been a lover of solo hiking, and this felt like the perfect challenge. I figured I'd park my car at one end of a section, hitch a ride to the other end, and hike it back. It wasn't going to be easy, but it seemed straightforward enough. The first few days were great. The trail was everything I imagined. Beautiful, peaceful, and wild. But then things started to go wrong, and I'll never forget what happened on the 3rd night. I woke up in the middle of the night with a gut feeling that something wasn't right. I couldn't shake the sense that I wasn't alone. I checked around my tent, but everything seemed fine, so I grabbed my rifle and flashlight and went outside. Nothing was there, or at least that's what I thought. I went back inside to check my gear, and that's when I realized my wallet was gone. It didn't make sense. I never lose things, but there it was, gone. All my personal information, my cash, and cards, taken. But who would do that? Was someone out there messing with me? As the days went on, things only got worse. My gear started disappearing. Small things, but enough to make me feel paranoid. A lighter, a knife, some food. Someone was definitely following me. I knew it, but I had no way to prove it. There was no cell signal out there, and I was in the middle of nowhere. By the 4th day, I realized I couldn't ignore it any longer. I was being stalked. Every night, I tried to secure my tent, hoping the thief wouldn't come back, but I could never shake the fear. Then came the hallucinations. I can't explain them. I don't have anxiety. I've never had any mental health issues, but those next few days were like nothing I'd ever experienced. I kept hearing things, seeing things out of the corner of my eye, a splash of water when there was no water, shadows moving just out of sight. It was like my mind was playing tricks on me. I kept moving, but every step felt heavier. Every night I tied my tent shut, but the fear was never far behind. One night, I heard footsteps around my camp. I grabbed my rifle and waited. They faded, but the terror stayed. By the time I was close to the trailhead, I knew I couldn't stay another night. I kept walking, pushing myself as hard as I could. Then, I heard it. A noise behind me. Footsteps. I turned, flashlight in hand, and saw something hide behind a tree. I didn't know if it was human, but I aimed my rifle anyway. When it stepped out from behind the tree, I could hardly believe my eyes. The figure was wearing my shorts, and its skin was covered in cuts and scratches. It looked almost inhuman. I didn't know what to do, but I fired a warning shot. The figure darted back into the woods. That's when I ran. I didn't stop until I was in my car, locked inside. I called the police. They came, but they didn't find anything. I was done. I wasn't going back to those woods, ever. This experience still haunts me. I've never been more scared in my life. I don't know what was following me, but I know I don't want to find out. I'm taking a break from the wilderness for good. If you're ever thinking of hiking the Appalachian Trail, take it from me, be prepared. You never know what's lurking out there. Smash that like button if you got scared, and leave a comment telling us which moment gave you chills. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not afraid. Choose one of the 2 videos on the screen to test your nerves. Boo!